My wife betrayed me right before the wedding. She went on a necessary vacation with her friend, and in the photos, Hi Reddit, I don't really know why I'm posting this, but maybe putting everything into words will help me make sense of it. I'm Adam, 35 years old, and I've been in a relationship with my fiancée, Lauren, 33, for 10 years. It's been a long, winding journey to where we are now, but things haven't always been as smooth as they seem on the surface. Lauren and I met at university during my senior year. I still remember the day we met. She was walking out of a lecture hall, clutching a massive stack of books, looking like she was on a mission. I was with a friend who dared me to go talk to her. Lauren had this aura, confident but not arrogant, funny without even trying. When I introduced myself, she gave me this sarcastic smirk and said, "Are you trying to help me carry my books or ruin my day?" Somehow, I found that endearing, and from there, we clicked. We started dating pretty quickly. Our first real date was at this small Italian restaurant near campus. It was cozy, nothing fancy, but the food was great, and the atmosphere felt special. By the end of the night, I knew there was something different about her. Over the next couple of years, we became inseparable, studying together, attending campus events, and planning our futures. I genuinely thought she was the one. Fast forward to last year. After nearly a decade of being together, I decided it was finally time to propose. I'd been saving up for a while, and I wanted it to be perfect. Lauren always talked about how much she loved our first date at that little Italian spot, so I thought it would be sentimental to go back there for the proposal. Except, the restaurant had closed years ago. That kind of threw me, but I didn't want to lose the nostalgic charm, so I found a different place, fancier, but similar vibes. It was the kind of place where the lighting is dim, the napkins are cloth, and the wine list has its own page. It cost way more than I'd planned, but I was determined to make it special. The day of the proposal was nerve-wracking. I hid the ring in my jacket pocket the entire day and kept checking to make sure it was still there. By the time we got to the restaurant, I was sweating bullets. Lauren, of course, noticed something was up. She kept asking, "Are you okay? You're acting weird." But I played it off, saying I was just tired from work. After we ordered, I went for it. I gave this whole speech about how much she meant to me, how I couldn't imagine my life without her, and then I pulled out the ring. Her face went blank for a second, and my heart stopped. I thought, oh God, she's going to say no. But then, she started crying, happy tears, and said yes. It felt like the weight of the world had lifted off my shoulders. Lauren was ecstatic about the engagement, and within a week, she had already started planning the wedding. To say she was excited would be an understatement. She was obsessed. She wanted it to be the wedding of the century, and while I wanted her to have the day of her dreams, the cost of everything started to add up fast. The first major expense was the venue. Lauren fell in love with this historic estate outside the city. It had sprawling gardens, chandeliers in every room, and a fountain that lit up at night. When she told me the price, $15,000, I nearly choked. I suggested we look at a few other places, maybe something more budget-friendly, but Lauren insisted this was the one. She said, "We've waited 10 years for this day. Don't you want it to be perfect?" I couldn't argue with that, so I caved. Next came the wedding coordinator. I didn't even know hiring one was a thing until Lauren told me we needed one. Apparently, this person was supposed to make sure everything ran smoothly, from the floral arrangements to the seating chart. It sounded like a glorified party planner to me, but Lauren said it was non-negotiable. The coordinator's fee? Another $8,000. At this point, I was starting to get anxious about how much we were spending. I'd always been careful with money, and while I had some savings, this wedding was quickly eating through it. I tried bringing up my concerns to Lauren, but every time I did, she would dismiss them. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime event," she'd say. "Stop stressing. We'll figure it out." She even made me feel guilty, saying things like, "Don't you think I deserve this after everything we've been through?" Then there were the smaller expenses that kept piling up. The dress was $4,000. The photographer was $6,500. The caterer was $12,000. Every time I thought we were done, Lauren would find something else we needed. At one point, she mentioned hiring a live band instead of a DJ because it would create a better vibe. When I asked how much that would cost, she shrugged and said, "Probably around $10,000, but it's worth it." I wanted to scream. I don't know when exactly the doubts started. Maybe it was the night Lauren casually mentioned upgrading the honeymoon to an all-inclusive resort in the Maldives. Or maybe it was when I caught her lying about how much she had spent on decorations. She told me $2,000, but the receipt I found said $4,500. I confronted her about it, and she laughed it off, saying, It's just a little white lie. I didn't want you to freak out. That comment stuck with me. A little white lie? How many other things had she been lying about? I started paying more attention, and the more I looked, the more red flags I found. For example, she claimed she was handling the guest list, but when I asked to see it, she got defensive and said it was too soon to finalize it. Then, one night, I overheard her on the phone telling a friend that she had invited an extra 50 people we hadn't even talked about. The kicker came when I checked our joint savings account one morning and saw that $5,000 was missing. When I asked Lauren about it, she acted confused and said, "Oh, that must have been for the down payment on the cake." The cake? 5 grand? I didn't even know that was possible. Things came to a head last week. We were supposed to meet with the wedding coordinator to finalize some details, but Lauren showed up an hour late. When I asked where she'd been, she got flustered and said she'd been running errands. Something about her tone didn't sit right with me, so I pressed her. That's when she snapped. She started yelling, accusing me of not trusting her and saying I was trying to micromanage the wedding. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told her I felt like this wedding was spiraling out of control, that we were spending money we didn't have, and that she was being dishonest with me. Instead of hearing me out, she stormed out of the room, shouting, "If you don't want to marry me, just say it." Now I'm sitting here wondering if I'm the crazy one. I love Lauren, but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. Am I overreacting? Or is this a sign that we're not as solid as I thought? Things started to change a few months after Lauren and I got engaged. At first, I thought it was just the stress of wedding planning, but looking back, I can't ignore the red flags that were right in front of me. Lauren began spending more and more time with her old university friends, some of whom I'd barely even heard her mention before. One name kept coming up, Max. Max was someone Lauren had studied with during her undergraduate years. I vaguely remembered her mentioning him in the past, a guy who had been in her study group, someone she described as brilliant but harmless. When she first started reconnecting with her old crowd, I didn't think much of it. Lauren was a social person, and I figured it was nice for her to have a break from the chaos of planning the wedding. But then things started to feel off. For one, Lauren was glued to her phone. I'd walk into the room, and she'd be texting, her face lit up by the screen. As soon as she noticed me, she'd lock the phone or flip it over on the table. At first, I laughed it off and teased her about her secret admirer, but she didn't even crack a smile. She just shrugged and said, "It's nothing important." I remember one night in particular. We were supposed to have dinner together, just the two of us. I'd made a point of setting aside time because it felt like we hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. Lauren had been out all afternoon, and when she finally walked through the door, she was on her phone, giggling at something. I asked her what was so funny, and she just said, "Oh, it's Max. He's hilarious." Then she put her phone away and sat down like nothing had happened. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the more I paid attention, the more uneasy I felt. Lauren had started going out more often. Dinners, happy hours, weekend brunches, all with her university friends. Every time I asked if I could join, she'd give me a dismissive response like, "It's just a girl's thing," or "You wouldn't know anyone there, so it'd be awkward." At one point, I asked her why she was spending so much time with these people all of a sudden, and she got defensive. "They're my friends, Adam. Why is that such a big deal?" I didn't know how to answer her without sounding paranoid, so I let it go. But then there was the night she came home smelling like cologne. It was faint, but noticeable. She claimed it was from hugging one of her friends goodbye. "You know how close Max and I are," she said casually, as if that explained everything. The thing is, I didn't know how close they were, or why she felt the need to hug him goodbye at all. The phone thing got worse, too. I started noticing that Lauren never let her phone out of her sight. She'd bring it into the bathroom when she showered, keep it under her pillow at night, and always make sure it was locked with a password. One time, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen, and a message from Max popped up. It said, "Can't stop thinking about last night. Let's talk soon." My stomach dropped. I didn't touch the phone, but when Lauren came out of the bathroom, I asked her point blank, "What's going on with you and Max?" She froze for a second, then laughed. "Are you serious? Adam, he's just a friend. You're being ridiculous." But her tone was off, too defensive, too dismissive. It didn't sit right with me. I decided to let it go for the moment, but the doubt kept gnawing at me. A few days later, I ran into Sarah, one of Lauren's bridesmaids, at a coffee shop. Sarah and I had always gotten along, and I figured she might have some insight. I casually asked her about Lauren's university friends, and she hesitated before saying, "Oh, Max? Yeah, They've always been close. Honestly, I'm surprised they didn't end up together back in the day. That was like a punch to the gut. I pressed her for more details, but she quickly changed the subject, clearly uncomfortable. That night, I confronted Lauren again. This time, I didn't sugarcoat it. I need you to be honest with me. Is there something going on between you and Max? She rolled her eyes and said, Adam, you're being ridiculous. I can't believe you're even asking me this. But the way she avoided eye contact told me everything I needed to know. I asked her to show me her phone, and she refused. This is about trust, she said, trying to turn it around on me. If you don't trust me, maybe we shouldn't be getting married. That hit me hard. I'd spent 10 years with this woman, building a life together, and now she was questioning everything because I asked to see her phone? It didn't make sense. But instead of pressing further, I backed off. I didn't want to believe that Lauren could betray me like that. I told myself I was overreacting, that maybe I was just stressed about the wedding and looking for problems where there weren't any. Then came the night that changed everything. Lauren had told me she was meeting her friends for dinner, but when I called the restaurant to ask if I could send over a bottle of champagne as a surprise, they told me there was no reservation under her name. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. Hours later, she came home, visibly tipsy, and when I asked her where she'd been, she said, "Oh, we ended up at a different place. Sorry, I forgot to text you." Her story didn't add up, but I didn't push it. Instead, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I went through her phone while she was asleep. I know it was a breach of privacy, and I hated myself for it, but I needed answers. What I found made my blood run cold. There were dozens of messages between her and Max, some innocent, but others that were unmistakably flirtatious. One message, in particular, stood out. "I wish I could see you more. Being around you makes me feel alive." I felt sick. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I confronted Lauren with the evidence. At first, she tried to deny it, but when I showed her the messages, she broke down. "It's not what it looks like," she insisted. "Max and I have a history, but it's in the past. I swear, nothing happened." I wanted to believe her, but how could I? She had been lying to me for months, hiding things, and keeping secrets. This wasn't the woman I thought I knew. Now I'm left wondering if our relationship can survive this. I've invested a decade of my life into Lauren, but trust is the foundation of any marriage, and right now, that foundation feels like it's crumbling beneath me. I don't know what to do. 3 weeks before our wedding, Lauren disappeared. I woke up that morning like any other day. Her side of the bed was empty, but that wasn't unusual. She often woke up early to work out or go for a walk. I assumed she was out for her usual morning routine until I saw her gym bag still sitting by the door. It was strange, but I didn't think much of it at first. I texted her, "Morning, where'd you run off to? And what about making coffee?" By the time an hour had passed and I hadn't heard back, I started to get a weird feeling. Lauren was usually quick to respond, especially since the wedding planning had her glued to her phone most days. I texted again. "Everything okay? You're not at the gym, are you?" No reply. I called her phone, and it rang a few times before going straight to voicemail. I left a message, telling her to call me back when she got the chance. But even then, I wasn't panicking. I figured she was caught up somewhere, maybe at a meeting with the florist or dress shop. She'd been so busy lately that it wouldn't have been out of the ordinary. By lunchtime, though, the unease had settled in fully. I tried calling again, and this time, the call didn't even ring. Her phone was disconnected. That's when I felt my chest tighten. I called her parents immediately, thinking maybe she'd gone to visit them and forgot to tell me. Her mom, Susan, answered, and when I asked if Lauren was with them, there was a pause. "No, we haven't seen her. Is something wrong?" I didn't want to alarm her, so I brushed it off, saying I was just trying to track her down. But the panic was starting to creep in. I called Sarah next, one of her bridesmaids. Sarah was Lauren's closest friend, and if anyone knew where she might be, it would be her. Sarah sounded groggy, like I'd just woken her up. "I haven't talked to her today," she said. "Why? Did something happen?" When I told her Lauren was missing, there was a long silence before she said, "Adam, I'm sure she's fine. Maybe she needed a break. You know how stressed she's been." A break? Without telling me? That didn't make any sense. Lauren and I had been together for a decade. She'd never just disappeared without a word. Even when we were fighting, she always made it clear where she was going and when she'd be back. I checked her social media accounts, desperate for any clue about where she might have gone, but there was nothing. No posts, no stories, no updates. It was like she'd vanished off the face of the earth. By late afternoon, I was starting to lose it. I drove to a few places she frequented, the gym, her favorite coffee shop, the bridal boutique she'd been visiting almost weekly. Everywhere I went, people shrugged and said they hadn't seen her. I stopped by her friend Natalie's apartment, hoping maybe she'd gone there to vent or escape the wedding stress. Natalie opened the door, her face a mixture of confusion and concern when I asked about Lauren. "I haven't seen her in days," she said. "Adam, is everything okay? You look pale." "I don't know," I admitted, my voice shaking. "She's gone. I've tried calling her, but her phone's disconnected. I don't know where she is." Natalie invited me inside and made me a cup of tea, though I was too jittery to drink it. She sat across from me, looking worried. "Do you think she left on purpose?" she asked hesitantly. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. No, she wouldn't just leave. Not like this. But as the words came out of my mouth, I wasn't sure if I believed them anymore. When I got home that evening, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Her things were still there. Her clothes in the closet, her shoes by the door, even her half-empty coffee mug from the night before sitting on the counter. It was like she'd been plucked out of existence, leaving everything else untouched. I sat on the couch, staring at her phone charger still plugged into the wall. Why would she leave without her phone? Without telling me anything? I called the police the next morning. I felt ridiculous, like I was overreacting, but something in my gut told me this wasn't normal. The officer I spoke to was calm and professional, asking me all the standard questions. When was the last time I saw her? Did she seem upset or stressed? Did she have a history of disappearing? I answered everything as best I could, but I could tell they weren't treating this as an emergency. "She's an adult," the officer said. "Sometimes people just need space. If she doesn't come back in a few days, let us know." A few days? I couldn't wait that long. I called Susan and her husband, Bill, again, hoping they'd heard something, but they were just as in the dark as I was. Susan sounded frantic, repeatedly asking, "What if something's happened to her?" Bill tried to stay calm, but I could hear the tension in his voice when he said, "Let's not jump to conclusions. She'll turn up." I spent the next several days retracing every step Lauren could have taken. I went through her planner, looking for appointments or meetings she might have had, but nothing stood out. I even went to her workplace and spoke to her coworkers. Most of them just looked at me with pity, saying they hadn't seen her in weeks since she'd taken time off to focus on the wedding. The worst part was the not knowing. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, only to sink when it wasn't her. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I started replaying every conversation we'd had in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, searching for clues I might have missed. Was she unhappy? Was she having second thoughts about the wedding? Was there someone else? The thought of Max crossed my mind more than once, but when I called him, he claimed he hadn't spoken to her in days. I didn't trust him, but I had no proof he was lying. The days stretched into a week, and still, there was no sign of her. The police finally agreed to file a missing person report, but they didn't seem optimistic. "Most of these cases resolve themselves," the officer said. "People usually come back when they're ready." Ready for what? To explain why she'd left me in the dark? To justify the sleepless nights and the constant knot in my stomach? I couldn't wrap my head around it. I felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, smiling, laughing, completely unaware of the chaos she'd left behind. On the 10th day of her disappearance, I got a call from Sarah. She sounded hesitant, like she didn't want to say whatever it was she called about. "Adam," she began, "I don't know how to tell you this, but I think I saw Lauren." My heart skipped a beat. "What? Where?" "It was at a bar downtown. I wasn't sure at first, but it looked like her. She was with some guy. I didn't get a good look, but I thought you should know." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to rush downtown and start searching every bar until I found her, but the other part of me felt crushed. If it was true, if she was out there with someone else, what did that mean for us? For everything we'd built together? That night, I sat in our apartment, staring at the empty space where her keys used to hang. I didn't know what to believe anymore. All I knew was that the woman I thought I was going to marry had vanished, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. The truth came out in the most unexpected way. After nearly 2 weeks of panic, sleepless nights, and imagining the worst-case scenarios about Lauren's disappearance, my best friend, Nate, sent me a message that completely flipped my world upside down. It was early morning, and I was sitting in the kitchen, staring at my cold coffee, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, hoping for a miracle. Then, Nate's name popped up with a simple text. "You're not going to believe this." Attached was a screenshot. At first, I couldn't process what I was looking at. The image showed Lauren on a beach, wearing a brightly colored swimsuit and oversized sunglasses, holding a cocktail. She was sitting on a lounge chair next to three women I didn't recognize, all laughing and posing for the camera. The caption read, "Dominican Republic vibes. Much needed getaway." My stomach twisted as I scanned the post. It had been uploaded the day before by one of the women tagged in the photo. Lauren's name was there too, clear as day. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. My mind raced with a million questions. Dominican Republic? Vacationing with friends? How? Why? After everything we had been through, after all the sleepless nights and frantic calls, she was sipping cocktails on a beach? I felt like a complete fool. For 2 weeks, I had been tearing myself apart, thinking something horrible might have happened to her, and here she was living it up in paradise. I called Nate immediately, my voice shaking. "Where the hell did you get this?" I demanded. He sounded hesitant, like he didn't want to be the one delivering the news. "One of the guys at work follows that girl, the one who posted it. He showed me, and I thought you should know." Dude, I didn't want to believe it either. I didn't even respond. I hung up the phone and went straight to the social media profile of the woman who had posted the picture. Her account wasn't private, and there were dozens of photos and videos from the trip. In every shot, Lauren looked carefree, smiling, laughing, dancing. There was a video of her and her friends riding ATVs, another of them clinking glasses at some fancy outdoor bar. In one clip, Lauren was standing in the ocean, posing dramatically as the waves hit her legs. She looked happy, like she didn't have a care in the world. I couldn't stop scrolling. The more I saw, the angrier I became. She hadn't just disappeared. She had deliberately hidden this from me. She had lied to everyone. Her friends, her parents, the police. She let me spiral into a pit of worry and despair while she was off enjoying a tropical vacation. And for what? To take a break from wedding stress? I called her phone again, knowing full well it was still disconnected. I slammed my fist on the counter in frustration. How could she do this to me? To us? I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to scream at her, to demand an explanation for how she could be so selfish, so heartless. After pacing the apartment for what felt like hours, I decided to call Susan, Lauren's mom. She deserved to know what was going on, and honestly, I needed someone to talk to. When she picked up, her voice was strained. "Adam, have you heard anything? We're so worried about her." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Susan, I need to tell you something. I found out where Lauren is." There was a pause. "What? Where is she? Is she okay?" "She's in the Dominican Republic," I said, my voice dripping with bitterness. "On vacation. With her friends." Another pause. Then, "What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense." "It's all over social media," I snapped. "She's been there for days. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't leave a note. She just took off. And now she's partying on a beach while we've all been worried sick." Susan was silent for a moment, and then I heard her start to cry. "I don't understand. Why would she do this? Adam, this doesn't sound like her." "Well, it is," I said flatly. "I have the proof. I'll send you the screenshots." After I sent them, Susan called me back, her voice shaky. "Bill and I are going to call her right now. If she's in trouble, we'll figure it out." I wanted to laugh. Trouble? Lauren wasn't in trouble. She was sipping margaritas and dancing in the sand while the rest of us were losing our minds. I told Susan as much, but she insisted that there had to be an explanation. "She's been under so much pressure lately," she said. "Maybe she just needed to clear her head." Clear her head? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Susan, she didn't just clear her head. She lied. She let me think she was missing. She let you think something horrible had happened to her. This isn't some little misunderstanding." I could tell Susan didn't know what to say. Just let us talk to her," she said finally. "We'll get to the bottom of this." I didn't have the energy to argue. I hung up and spent the rest of the day in a haze, replaying everything over and over in my mind. Every detail of the past few weeks felt like a cruel joke. The worst part was realizing how little I really knew about the woman I was supposed to marry. Who was she, really? How could someone I'd spent 10 years with be capable of something like this? That evening, I got a call from Sarah. I wasn't sure I wanted to talk to her, but I answered anyway. She sounded hesitant. "Adam, I heard about everything. Are you okay?" "No, I'm not okay," I said bluntly. "What the hell is wrong with her, Sarah? Did you know about this?" "Of course not," she said quickly. "I swear, I had no idea. I'm just as shocked as you are." There was a long pause, and then she added, "I tried calling her. She didn't pick up, but she texted me back." My heart raced. What did she say? She said she needed space, that she felt like everything was getting too overwhelming, and she just needed to get away for a while. I laughed bitterly. So her solution was to fake her disappearance and go on vacation? That's insane. I know, Sarah said quietly. But, Adam, I think there's more to this. She's been acting weird for months. Maybe she's not telling us the whole truth. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't care about Lauren's excuses or whatever justification she thought she had for pulling a stunt like this. All I cared about was the fact that she had betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about our entire relationship. How could I ever look at her the same way again? As I sat alone in our apartment that night, surrounded by reminders of the life we were supposed to be building together, I felt a wave of anger, sadness, and betrayal wash over me. Lauren had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. The confrontation started with a call I never wanted to make. After everything I had seen and learned about Lauren's secret trip, I needed answers. I needed her to explain herself, even though a part of me already knew I wouldn't like what she had to say. I waited until late evening, hoping I'd catch her when she wasn't surrounded by her friends or otherwise distracted. I wasn't even sure she'd pick up, but I dialed her number anyway. To my surprise, it rang. Hearing the familiar click as she answered, I froze for a moment. Adam, she said, her tone casual, like she hadn't just vanished for 2 weeks. Lauren, I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Where the hell have you been? Dominican Republic? Really? What is going on with you? There was a pause, and I could hear the background noise of music and laughter, as though she were standing on a patio or at a beachside bar. She sighed, and then, in the most infuriatingly calm tone, she said, It's not a big deal, Adam. It was just a surprise trip. My friends planned it last minute to help me de-stress before the wedding. I almost dropped the phone. Not a big deal, I said, my voice rising. Are you kidding me right now? You disappeared without a word, disconnected your phone, made everyone think something horrible had happened to you. And you're telling me it's not a big deal? Adam, calm down, she said, her voice growing defensive. I didn't think it would turn into such a huge thing. I needed a break, and the girls thought this would be the perfect way to get my mind off everything. It's not like I'm doing anything wrong. Not doing anything wrong? I repeated, disbelief dripping from every word. You lied to me, Lauren. To everyone. Your parents were terrified. I thought, God, I thought something had happened to you. And all this time, you were on a beach with your so-called friends, posting pictures like nothing was wrong. She sighed again, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. I didn't lie, Adam. I just didn't tell you. There's a difference. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A difference? Are you serious right now? You let me think you were missing. I called the police, Lauren. I filed a report. Your mom has been crying every day, and your dad is about to lose his mind. And you're telling me this is just some harmless trip? It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, she said, her voice growing colder. I didn't think you'd overreact like this. Honestly, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Blowing this out of proportion? I snapped. Lauren, this isn't just about the trip. It's about trust. How am I supposed to marry someone who disappears without a word and doesn't even care how much it hurt everyone? She was silent for a moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she was starting to realize how serious this was. But then she said, Adam, I think you need to calm down and stop making this about you. I needed this. I needed time away from all the pressure, from everything. I couldn't hold back anymore. The pressure? Lauren, we're supposed to be a team. If you were feeling overwhelmed, you could have talked to me. Instead, you ran away and acted like none of us mattered. Do you even understand how selfish that is? I'm not selfish, she snapped back, her voice rising now. I've been doing everything for this wedding. Everything. You haven't had to lift a finger, and now you're making me feel bad for taking some time for myself? That's not fair. Fair? I said, incredulous. You want to talk about fair? What's not fair is spending 10 years building a life with someone, only for them to throw it all away because they needed time. What's not fair is finding out the person you love doesn't care enough to let you know they're safe. This isn't about the wedding anymore, Lauren. This is about who you are as a person. She laughed bitterly, and the sound sent a chill down my spine. Who I am as a person. Nice, Adam. Real nice. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, I wouldn't feel the need to get away in the first place. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. Lauren, you have 2 choices, I said, my voice icy. You get on the next flight home, or the wedding is off. No excuses, no delays. If you care about this relationship at all, You'll prove it by coming back and facing this like an adult." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear the faint hum of the music and voices behind her, but she didn't say a word for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her tone dismissive and almost bored. "Adam, you're being ridiculous. I'm not cutting my trip short just because you're throwing a tantrum. I'll come back when I'm ready." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "When you're ready?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "Lauren, do you even care about me? About us? Because right now, it doesn't feel like it." "Of course I care," she said, her tone exasperated. "But I'm not going to let you bully me into doing something I don't want to do. You need to stop making this about you, and let me enjoy the rest of my trip. I'll be back in time for the wedding. Isn't that enough?" "No, Lauren," I said, my voice firm. "It's not enough. Not anymore." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking as I set the phone down on the counter. My heart was pounding, and I felt like I was about to explode. I had given her an ultimatum, a chance to fix this, and she had thrown it back in my face. All the years we had spent together, all the memories, all the plans for the future, it felt like they meant nothing to her. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't know the woman I was supposed to marry. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know her anymore. The decision to cancel the wedding wasn't something I made lightly. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment reaction fueled by anger or heartbreak. It came after days of reflection, sleepless nights, and agonizing over every detail of the last 10 years of my life. But when Lauren refused to come back, when she dismissed everything we'd built together as if it was nothing more than an inconvenience, I knew I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't marry her. The betrayal, the lies, the complete disregard for the people who loved her. It was too much. After our disastrous phone call, I spent the rest of the night sitting on the couch, staring at the stack of wedding invitations on the coffee table. They were supposed to be mailed weeks ago, but Lauren kept delaying it, saying she wanted to make sure everything was perfect before sending them out. Looking at them now, they felt like a cruel joke. "Adam and Lauren cordially invite you to celebrate their love." Those words stared back at me like a taunt. I wanted to tear them apart, to shred every last reminder of the life we were supposed to have together, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to think clearly. The next morning, I called the venue. My hands were trembling as I dialed the number, knowing full well what this decision would cost me. Financially, emotionally, socially. The woman who answered was polite, cheerful even, until I told her I needed to cancel the reservation. There was a long pause before she said, "I'm so sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, the cancellation fee is 50% of the total cost." 50%. That was $15,000, gone in an instant. I felt sick. "There's no way around it?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm afraid not," she said gently. "It's part of the contract." I thanked her and hung up, staring at the empty apartment around me. $15,000 for a wedding that would never happen. And that wasn't even the full extent of it. There was the photographer, the caterer, the florist, all of whom had non-refundable deposits. By the time I calculated everything, I realized I'd lost over $20,000. That was my savings, money I'd been putting aside for years, all gone in the blink of an eye. But as painful as the financial loss was, the emotional weight was even heavier. I had to tell people, our families, our friends, everyone who had been looking forward to the wedding. They all needed to know it was off. And more importantly, they needed to know why. Lauren might have been content to act like nothing was wrong, but I wasn't going to let her rewrite the narrative to make herself look like the victim. People deserve the truth. I started with my parents. Calling them was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My mom cried when I told her, not because the wedding was canceled, but because she couldn't believe what Lauren had done. "How could she treat you like this?" she kept saying. "You've always been so good to her." My dad, on the other hand, was furious. "Good riddance," he said bluntly. "You don't need someone like that in your life. She showed you her true colors, Adam. Be thankful you found out before it was too late." Next, I called Susan and Bill, Lauren's parents. That conversation was even harder. Susan broke down immediately, sobbing into the phone and apologizing over and over again. "I don't know what's wrong with her," she said. "This isn't who she is. She's not like this." "Maybe she is," I said quietly. "Or maybe this is who she's always been, and I just didn't see it." Bill was quieter, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice. "I'm sorry, Adam," he said. "You deserved better than this. I wish I could say something to make it right." "You don't have to apologize," I told him. "This isn't your fault." After that, I started drafting the message I would send to everyone else. It took me hours to get the wording right. I didn't want it to come across as bitter or vindictive, but I also didn't want to sugarcoat the truth. People needed to understand why the wedding was canceled, not because of some vague, irreconcilable differences, but because Lauren had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The final message read, "Dear friends and family, it is with a heavy heart that I must inform you that the wedding will not be taking place. After much reflection, I have made the difficult decision to call it off. This was not a decision I made lightly, but it was necessary given the circumstances. I want to be transparent with all of you, as many of you have been a part of our journey over the years. Unfortunately, Lauren has been unfaithful, and I cannot move forward with a marriage built on lies. I appreciate your understanding and support during this difficult time. Thank you for being there for me. Sincerely, Adam." I sent it to everyone on the guest list, hitting send with a mixture of relief and dread. Part of me expected a flood of replies, but for the most part, people were respectful. I got a few messages of support, mostly from close friends and family members, but there were also a few awkward responses from acquaintances who didn't know what to say. I didn't blame them. What do you say to someone whose life just imploded? The hardest part was dealing with the aftermath. Everywhere I went, I felt like people were looking at me, whispering about me. Friends who had been mutual with Lauren and me avoided me altogether, unsure how to navigate the situation. Some people even tried to defend her, saying things like, "She was probably just stressed," or "Maybe you're overreacting." Those comments cut deep, but I tried to brush them off. The people who mattered, the ones who really knew me, stood by my side. Nate, as always, was my rock. He showed up at my apartment with beer and pizza the night I sent the message, refusing to let me wallow in silence. "Screw her, man," he said bluntly. "You dodged a bullet. Better to find out now than 10 years down the line when she pulls this crap again." As much as I hated to admit it, he was right. Lauren had shown me who she really was, and as painful as it was to let go of the life we had planned, I knew I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering if she would betray me again. The trust was gone, and without trust, there was no foundation for a marriage. In the days that followed, I started packing up her things. Each item I put into a box felt like a small weight lifting off my shoulders. The framed photos of us, the little trinkets she'd collected over the years, the wedding dress she'd hidden in the back of the closet. It all went into boxes, ready to be sent to her parents' house. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. When Lauren finally returned from her trip, she didn't even bother to call me. Instead, she texted me, asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The wedding was canceled, the relationship was over, and I was ready to move on. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity, a sense of peace. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I deserved better. And I wasn't going to settle for less. When I thought the storm had finally started to settle, Nate sent me another bombshell, one I didn't see coming and one that completely shattered any lingering hope I had that things with Lauren could ever be salvaged. It was about a week after I had canceled the wedding, and I had been doing my best to focus on moving forward. I wasn't sleeping well, but at least I wasn't checking my phone every 5 seconds, expecting her to say something that would fix it all. I'd boxed up most of her things, finalized the payments for the canceled vendors, and tried to occupy myself with work and friends. Then Nate texted me again. "You're not going to like this." Just seeing those words made my stomach twist. He'd been the one to show me Lauren's Dominican Republic vacation, so I braced myself for another painful revelation. This time, it wasn't a photo of Lauren laughing on the beach or sipping cocktails. It was a photo taken at a dimly lit restaurant. Lauren was sitting at a small, round table with a man I didn't recognize at first glance. She was leaning forward, smiling, and holding his hand across the table. He was looking back at her with the kind of expression you can only describe as intimate. The caption read, "Dinner with an old flame." Nate followed up with another text. "That's Alex, right? Her ex? Thought you should see this." My hands trembled as I stared at the image. Alex. That name hit me like a slap across the face. He was the one ex Lauren had told me about in detail, a guy she dated in college before she and I got together. She always described him as a mistake and someone I'll never go back to. Seeing them together now, her holding his hand like they were still in love, made my chest tighten. It was as if every ounce of betrayal from the past few weeks had been condensed into this single moment. I called Nate immediately. "Where the hell did you find this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Her friend just posted it," Nate said. "I follow her on Instagram. I guess she didn't think you'd see it. Or maybe she didn't care." I sat down heavily on the couch, the phone pressed to my ear. "I can't believe this," I muttered. "She's been lying to me this whole time." She's with Alex. In public. Yeah. Nate said carefully, it doesn't look great. You doing okay, man? I wasn't okay. I felt sick to my stomach. Everything Lauren had said, every excuse she'd made about needing space and taking a break, suddenly felt like a carefully constructed lie. I hung up with Nate and stared at the photo again. It felt like a punch to the gut. She didn't even look guilty. She looked happy, carefree, like she hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built over the past decade. I couldn't sit with this alone. I decided to call Lauren, even though every part of me knew it was pointless. I needed to hear her explanation, no matter how ridiculous or insulting it would be. When she picked up, her voice was chipper, like nothing had happened. Adam, hey, she said. What's up? I didn't waste time. I saw the picture, Lauren. The one of you and Alex at the restaurant. Care to explain? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her tone was defensive. Oh, that? Adam, it's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like. I repeated, my voice rising. You're holding hands with your ex, Lauren, in a restaurant, smiling at him like he's the love of your life. How exactly am I supposed to interpret that? She sighed, and I could tell she was trying to come up with a way to spin this in her favor. Look, Alex reached out while I was on the trip. He just wanted to catch up, that's all. We're old friends, Adam. There's nothing romantic about it. Nothing romantic? I snapped. Lauren, you're holding his hand in a restaurant. That's not catching up. That's a date. She groaned, as if I was the one being unreasonable. Adam, you're overreacting. I needed someone to talk to, and Alex has always been a good listener. He gets me. It wasn't a date. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He gets you? Lauren, you're engaged to me. You were supposed to marry me. And now you're telling me your ex, is the one who gets you? Do you even hear yourself right now? Adam, stop, she said sharply. You're making this into something it's not. I was feeling overwhelmed, and Alex happened to be there. That's all. You're acting like I cheated or something. You did cheat, I said, my voice cold. Emotionally, if not physically. You lied to me, you betrayed my trust, and now you're trying to justify it by playing the victim. I'm done, Lauren. I'm done with this, and I'm done with you. Adam, wait, she said quickly, her voice tinged with panic. You don't mean that. We can work through this. I'll come back, and we'll talk. I'll explain everything. There's nothing left to explain, I said. You've shown me exactly who you are. The wedding is off, and so are we. I hung up before she could say anything else. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I knew I was making the right decision. There was no going back now. The fallout was immediate. Lauren must have realized she couldn't spin the situation in her favor, so she started reaching out to mutual friends, trying to paint me as the villain. She told people I was too strict, that I had unrealistic expectations, that I'd been controlling throughout our relationship. But most people saw through her lies. They knew me, and they knew I wasn't the kind of person she was trying to make me out to be. Susan and Bill, her parents, were devastated. Susan called me in tears, apologizing again and again for Lauren's behavior. I don't know what's gotten into her, she said. This isn't the daughter I raised. I didn't know what to say to her. I appreciated her support, but it didn't change what had happened. Lauren had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. My friends rallied around me, especially Nate. He made it his mission to keep me busy, dragging me out for beers, hikes, anything to keep my mind off the situation. You're better off without her, he kept saying. You'll see that eventually. As the weeks went by, I started to believe him. The pain was still there, the betrayal still stung, but I was beginning to see a path forward. I didn't need Lauren. I didn't need her lies, her excuses, or her drama. What I needed was to rebuild my life, one step at a time. The relationship was over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free, and that was something worth holding on to.